How's it going, guys? I thought this case was super interesting. I really liked how we learned more about the selling process, but it almost felt the same because Karen really flipped the script and was doing due diligence on the buyers as the seller. I think there's a few things that we can do to make ourselves trustworthy buyers. The first of which would just be expressing ourselves. I feel like people can feel it. People can tell when you're telling the truth and when you're doing something or saying something that you mean to do. It feels pretty obvious. You can tell when someone's genuine or not. I think actions I would take to do that, though, just the little things, like flying out to meet them or taking them out to lunch, just kind of connecting with them on a personal level before diving into anything about the deal. And I think that would make yourself come off as a more trustworthy, principle-driven person and allow you to connect as a buyer because you'd be trustworthy, obviously. One part about this case that I did find interesting was the transparency with the employees, and I think there's a high risk that they get scared and leave before the process is over. The benefit, though, is you have their trust. You're always transparent with them. And I think it can create a better opportunity for a buyer because they're not worried if the employees know what's happening. They're part of the vetting process, so they know what's going to happen. Um, like I said, though, I think it could lead to some concerns and potentially employee turnover. But I think if they're bought in, I think it would actually be better in the long run. I don't know if I would recommend this approach to other business owners. I think it's risky. I think it could uh, devalue your firm. But I mean, Karen had such a unicorn here with the trustworthiness that she built into her organization. So they were, ready to trust her with whatever was best for them, and they knew that she had their best interest in mind. I don't think this is something that I would recommend unless you really had built an environment around trust, kind of like we talked about before. The similar point was reimbursing clients if profits were over 40%. This, I think, is an advantage in a very competitive industry. I think you are going to win more deals and contracts and revenue if you're transparent like this. Like, people love to do business with honest people and people who aren't maximizing profits. And so maybe you're losing a little bit here and there, but in the long run, I think you're just going to have a steady, solid business. Um, Obviously, the company reputation is going to be through the roof, and the customer relationships are going to be very, very solid. So I actually really like that idea. I mean, 40% is like a healthy margin on any job. It's not nothing, right? So, uh, kind of making the pie bigger here. I think like both parties are better off. Um, Kind of moving a little bit further into the case, I think Precision was just such a fascinating business because of Karen's commitment to her employees, and obviously the dedication to the customers as well. There's a few actions that I think are critical for us as buyers coming into a situation like this. I think you just want to emphasize that you want to build, you want to preserve the seller's legacy more than anything else, and you want to keep it special. Uh, if there's values, you should know about them as the buyer. You should come in and say, "Hey, listen, like I really appreciate these values. These are values that I want in the business, and I want it to stay this way. I like what you've done with it." Um, that being said, there is always a need to grow, but I think preservation in terms of the values, no modernization. Like, in what sense would modernization take away values? It shouldn't, and if it does, you're doing it wrong. So I think the values, and which is really what the legacy of a business is. The business isn't the legacy of $10 million in revenue a year. The business is the legacy of providing honest work, providing good jobs to hardworking people, faith, family, everything that was said in the case. And you can certainly modernize and keep that legacy, those values going strong. And then the last thing I'd like to touch on, and I kind of mentioned this before, is kind of the reverse dynamic of Karen vetting the buyers. Obviously, every seller's going to do this, but Karen seemed to be very deliberate about the way that she did it. I think a buyer could demonstrate respect for sellers' values just by learning them, by listening. I think lending a listening ear is a huge thing. Obviously, you want to come in with your questions, but at the end of the day, you're there to listen and you're there to learn. And I think in order to have a successful value-centered transition, you need to know those values and you need to know what's important to the seller. And the only way you're going to do that is by listening. It's not going to be by asking your questions or talking. So as buyers, I think we can really focus on listening to the seller and getting comfortable, just letting them talk, letting them share. You know, a lot of people like to fill the quiet times with words, frankly. And so, like, if you give people time to speak, oftentimes they will, at least from what I've found. So, overall, just really fantastic case. Really loved it. And just thought there was a lot of unique things here that I hadn't considered before, but I find super interesting. Thanks, guys.